Alright, so at the beginning of Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic War, you've got these famous lines which have been memorized since time immemorial by school children, either to their delight or their horror. Caesar starts by describing the general geography of Gaul for his Roman readers who have never seen the place with their own eyes. Alright, so he's laying the scene here. So Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres. This should be fairly straightforward, but then immediately Caesar starts to get you a little bit tripped up with the vagaries of Latin prose style here. So note, in partes tres quorum, and the quorum is going to refer back to these tres partes, all right? And to simplify this, I've got it laid out here in color-coded. So quorum, of which, and then Caesar has a carefully balanced tricolon here, right? So note the way that it shrinks and then expands rapidly, right? So unam incolunt, so quorum, of which, unam incolunt belgae. Note that these are going to be feminine singulars because they're the individual constituent parts of the tres, which are then contained in the relative clause started by quorum. So unam incolunt belgae, aliam, and then you need to supply incolunt here, aquitani, and then tertiam, and again you need to supply incolunt in your mind, tertiam incolunt qui, that is short for those who, qui, and then this relative clause itself is a little bit involved because then you have those who, and your main verb here is going to be appellantur, right? So those who appellantur in ipsorum lingua Celtae, but nostra, and then you have to supply lingua Galli, right? So they call themselves the Celts, but they're called by the Romans the Gauls here. Okay, so hopefully that went some way to simplifying this sentence, which usually gives the beginning Caesar reader a little bit of trouble. All right. So then you'll note that he omnes lingua institutis legibus inter se differunt. Differunt here is your main verb. And note that you have a syndeton here. There's no conjunctions, all right? So they differ in language and institutes or customs or laws or established orders, and then and legibus, okay? So note right here to simplify the general structure of the syntax, you have he omnes, these all, right? Inter se differunt, right? And then here you have the three ablatives expressing the modes in which they differ. Okay. Coming back to the main passage here, you have Gallos ab aquitanis carumna flumen a Belgis matrona et sequana dividit. Right here, I've simplified this one as well. So note here that Gallos is your ablative, or your accusative plural. It's your direct object, and this is the Gauls themselves, right? The subject here is garumna flumen, and you need to supply dividit, which is given to you in the next line. Note that quite often Latin will build up a sentence, and the verb which goes with the subjects of all the sentences, or all the clauses within the sentence, will come last. So there is some delay in understanding that you need to exercise. So here, the garumna flumen dividit Gallos ab aquitanis, and then a Belgis matrona et sequana dividit. Right? These are individual names of rivers. What's happened here is if you look, dividit is singular, even though you have garumna flumen up here and then matrona et sequana right here. You would expect that your verb would be plural dividunt, but here the number of the verb is attracted into the singular because the noun which occurred right before it is in the singular. Right? So this is in the strictest sense not what you would expect to be grammatically correct, but it is pretty common in Latin prose. All right. So then this next clause is pretty involved. You'll note it starts with horum omnium and goes all the way down to gerunt. And here you'll see how involved a Latin sentence can be. Okay, so horum omnium, right, of these all, right, you have fortissimi sunt belgae, and then Caesar makes this claim that the belgae sunt fortissimi, and then he gives you some explanation of this. Propter ea quod, because. And then he lists three separate reasons why it is that they are the strongest or the bravest, but in so doing, he starts with a simple reason. The second one is a little bit more expansive, and then the third is the most expansive clause or expansive sentence of all. It contains a few subordinate clauses. Okay, so here, propter ea quod, because ac cultu atque humanitate. Right? So here you have two ablatives and then a genitive modifying them. Right? So a cultu provinciae et a humanitate provinciae longissime absunt. Here the subject of absunt is still, of course, the Belgae. Right? So that's reason one. Minimeque ad eos mercatores saepe comeant. Here you want to construe minime and saepe together, often in the least degree, or the least often, or with very little frequency. Right? So mercatores comeant ad eos. Here the eos referred to is going to be the Belgae. Right? And here important, your subject is mercatores. Right? So mercatores important, ea, those things, quae ad effeminandos animos pertinent. Okay? And then finally, and proximi sunt Germanis. Here note that this is a dative. And then the Germanis are explained in two relative clauses. Okay? So the Germanis, so they're proximi to the Germanis qui trans Rhenum incolunt. Note right here, the Rhenus is the Rhine River. And quibuscum continenter bellum gerunt. Here, the subject of gerunt is the Belgae, right? And then quibuscum is, of course, referring to Germanis. Here, remember that quite often with pronouns, cum is attached to the end of the pronoun rather than placed before it, as you would expect in ordinary cases, where you'd have cum quibus, okay? So quibuscum, with whom.